Ooh, what's up? What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another session of Coffee and Martial Arts. Salute, salute, salute. Cheers. Oh my God, coffee is amazing as usual. This morning, coffee is amazing, and so is our guest. Yes, sir. We have a great guest today. A good friend, an amazing martial artist with a lifelong, trajectory in the arts. He's been doing martial arts since he was a kid, and he's been around the block, as you would say. You know, learning from many different people, many different arts, and creating his own version of the Korean style, Farang Mu Sul, Modern Farang Mu Sul. But before we go to our guest, you know me, I need to say the proper announcement. Let me just say that we are going live through our Facebook page, Master Frank Soto. Just look for Master Frank Soto page, and please like and follow us. That really helps us with the algorithm, so we can give this message out to a positive message about the martial arts to all of you martial artists, martial arts enthusiasts, fans, and just regular people that like to watch the show. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate. None of you are, I should say, extraordinary people, because you guys are extraordinary because you're here with us all the time. Thank you so much. I'm also going live through our YouTube channel, the Kinetic Dragon channel. So please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click on the little bell so you get notified every time we go live, okay? We go live quite often. We're also going live through the Internacional with a C Hall of Fame of Argentina. Okay, this is a nice group of martial artists led by Master Juan Martin Alvarez. Salute to you, and thank you for letting us be a part of this. Okay, so today, like I was saying, we have a great guest, okay? A good friend of mine. He is an amazing martial artist, okay? He has the title of Grandmaster, Kuksanim, okay, which is a 10-degree Grandmaster. He's been in the arts well, pretty much most of his life, right? He has a very impressive curriculum and a resume, background. He started, well, you know what? I'm not going to spoil this. Why not bring our guest, Kuksanim Michael Alba. Let's bring him in. Hello, my friend.
Good morning. ¿Cómo estás?
Good morning. Buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
How you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. Trying to stay cool out here. It's been very hot lately.
Yeah. Where you at, sir?
I live in Santa Rosa, California, which is about an hour north of San Francisco. It's in the region called the Wine Country. And lately we've been experiencing for us, I'm from San Francisco originally. Anything over 80, we're melting. But it's been like in the high 90s and over 100 degrees here in Santa Rosa, and for me that's really hot. So we're doing our best to beat the heat, as they say.
Oh yeah, 100 degrees, that can be bad. Yeah. I'm in the Sonora, Arizona desert, so yeah, it's a little.
You're
bit
used
hard.
to that.
Yeah, it's not easy, but anyways, I just want to say thank you so much for accepting the invitation, sir, for being here on the show. It's an honor.
No, the honor is all mine. Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it, really.
And we're going to have questions from people, comments and stuff. But I always ask the same first question. If you can please share with us, so for the people who don't have the honor or the pleasure of knowing you, share a little bit about your background. How is it that you started with the martial arts, and how is it that you got to where you're at today, sir? Please.
Sure. Honestly, it's a little bit embarrassing for me to talk about my history, because on paper it's very long, and it's kind of, it seems like I'm bragging, but no,
this is cool. This is good.
The short version is I learned how to fight, should I say. I learned how to fight since I was a little kid, and that was partially because of where I grew up as a little boy in San Francisco. I grew up in the Bayview Hunters Point, predominantly black district, and that was during the 60s, which was something called the Civil Rights Movement. So there was a lot of turmoil, and I would get challenged a lot as a little kid going to school and such, and playing in the playground, so on. So I learned how to fight since I was a little kid. By the time I went kindergarten, by the time I was 5, I already knew how to box and how to fight. how to defend myself, how to defend myself in the street, all that kind of stuff. And it was my dad, my father, who was a very good boxer, actually, and my older brother, Sergio, who was also a very good fighter. They had a lot of experience in that area. And they literally taught me how to fight since I was a little kid. So mostly like boxing and street fighting, things like that. And it wasn't until the mid 60s, during that time, martial arts here in America wasn't very well known the way it is right now. Right now, you can't throw a rock without hitting a martial arts school. Almost, it seems like it's on the internet. There's DVDs, videos, you name it. It's very exposed, which is on one hand a very good thing.
Yeah, we have this, for example.
But back in those days, it was not so easily found. It was considered very mysterious, very the Oriental martial arts, and very deadly and all that kind of stuff. The death touch and things like judo chop, I used to say all the time, was like, oh, it's dangerous and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm sure you can relate to a certain degree. But at any rate, it was watching a television show called The Green Hornet where I saw Bruce Lee for the first time. And that's when I actually saw Oriental martial arts and the whole philosophy of martial arts. And that was very interesting for me. That really awakened a desire to learn more about this. And as it turns out, as I was going through school, I found out that several of my friends not only could box and knew how to fight, because we had a group of friends that we used to hang out all the time. I found out that several of them did martial arts. I was like, oh, really cool. So I started working out with them and sharing and training and sparring, things like that, as young kids do. And at some point, I decided to formally train in martial arts. And one of my classmates, since like the 4th or 5th grade, his name was Percy Harris. He was training in a martial arts called Kempo, Shaolin Kempo, and the teacher was Professor Carlos Navarro. That was in the Mission District where I was raised, and he introduced me to him, and that was the first official martial art that I started to do was with Carlos Navarro, and that was in the late 60s, probably about 68, 69, somewhere around there. And that really awoke a passion in me that was literally insatiable. I never imagined that I wanted to do martial arts or get a belt or be a black belt or anything. But once I started training in martial arts, I was so fascinated. I wanted nothing less than to be a master. I wanted to know everything there is to know about this. And living in San Francisco, it is somewhat of a mecca of martial arts. There's very high masters of different martial arts styles, whether it's Chinese or Japanese or Korean martial arts. A lot of them are in San Francisco. And to my good fortune, I was able to meet a lot of these people along my way. And then, of course, when I moved to Mexico with my family in the early 70s, I continued training in Mexico. And that's where I found Korean martial arts. And I was, again, just really, really fascinated with Korean martial arts. I was able to formally study Korean martial arts. And that was Taekwondo, Motokwan, in Leon, Guanajuato. But when I came back, I was very interested in continuing studying more about Korean martial arts. I was very fascinated by the kicking. I remember going into my school, my Kempo school, and there was a little like a cork board on the way in where they put notices and pictures and things like that. And there was a picture of Joe Louis, the PKA heavyweight champion, doing a flying sidekick. It's a very famous picture. It's been around for a long time. And that used to just captivate me. Every time I walked into school, I'd look at that picture and like, oh, I want to be able to do that. And there was actually a book that my teacher had on the little coffee table there in the little lobby. It was a small little lobby. And that was This is Karate by Masoyama. And then I used to just read that book and I was fascinated. And there was several pictures of Japanese masters doing flying sidekicks. And I was just fascinated by how these people could kick so high and fly through the air. And I realized that Korean martial arts were very renowned for their kicking skills. Exactly. That picture right there, that flying sidekick. Oh my God. I was so intrigued with that picture. So when I came back to the United States in 1976, I started to look. I got into Japanese martial arts. I had done some other styles. I'd done some Chinese systems and some Korean systems. I'd done Korean systems in Mexico, and some other things I was exposed to, Filipino styles and so on. But I started taking Shorin Ryu with Johnny Pereira and some of his group. My older brother had started training in that, and so I did that for a bit. And then I discovered Taekwondo and Hapkido in a system called Farang Kwan, and this gentleman was Master Daewon Park, and I went to his school and I interviewed with him, and again I was just really, really impressed with him. He just, he had pictures of him breaking bricks with his fingers and rocks with his hands, and I was like, how do you hit a rock, a big rock, with your hand, and the rock breaks and your hand doesn't break? That just puzzled me, and it was very fascinating.
Sure.
So I started training with Master Park, and he's the one who exposed me to not only Taekwondo and Hapkido, but also to this. It was not so much of a martial arts per se; it was the philosophy and the history and the whole background of what was called the Farang warriors. These are these ancient warriors from Korea who were very popular during that time, and very famous for their not only their martial arts skills, but as like complete warriors. They're warrior scholars. They were poets, and they learned dancing and floor arrangement, and they hiked in the mountains and trained. And there was this whole brotherhood that they had. I found that very interesting. And as they continued that organization, they were very fierce warriors, and they were responsible for uniting the country of Korea during this time when it was divided into various kingdoms. They called the Three Kingdoms period.
Right.
They were a force for uniting Korea. So yeah, all that fascinated me, and I thought it was just so interesting. And again, I wanted to learn not only all about martial arts, but now it's Korean martial arts, and now I want to learn all about Farang. And then I find out that there's other ways of saying Farang. There's Hwarang, and there's Warang, and there's all these other westernized spellings of the characters of Warang. The first way I had learned it was called Farang. So that's why we use the term Farang Mu Sul versus Hwarang or Harang Mu Sul, or other versions of that name. And we came up with the name Farang Mu Sul for very specific reasons. Some of them have to do with legalities, but that's another long story. But ever since then, it was just a matter of me wanting to be a good martial artist and teach good students that were good people, that get the benefits of being a better person through martial arts, that really helped me through difficult times in my life. And of course, to learn how to defend yourself, to make sure what you're doing is solid, and can we test this out, and can we practice it, and how do we fight with this? That whole thing always was very important to me. So ultimately, that's kind of what I ended up doing. At some point, I was researching Bruce Lee because I was such a fan. Once I started seeing his movies and reading more about him in the magazines, I realized that I found out that he taught a system called Jeet Kune Do, and he also practiced Wing Chun. So I was like, oh, what's this Wing Chun? Oh, what's this Jeet Kune Do? So I started studying that, and the whole philosophy that Bruce Lee had about researching the strongest components of the various styles and combining them to make a very strong, complete, and comprehensive style that's very street effective. That really resonated with me. And I looked for that, as a matter of fact, but ultimately I decided to create my own version of it, at least within my own training. I decided I'm going to train in everything, get a black belt in everything, and of course, impossible. But I did train in a lot of different systems, and I tried to create my own version of a Korean Jeet Kune Do, kind of, if you will. And that's what ultimately became a very comprehensive style that brings all these components together, not so much as a mismatch of different things, like, oh, we're going to do some Muay Thai, oh, we're going to do some Jiu-Jitsu, oh, we're going to do some Wing Chun. Right. It's a system that I try to create that fuses all the elements in an integrated manner, that where one element of combat has a certain strength, and that's usually designated by the distance you are between your opponent. For example, a far distance would be, say, kicking range. Again, Jeet Kune Do, right? In the kicking range, at some point as you move in closer, the kicks are less effective and the hands take over. The hands are much more dominant. You can still use a certain degree of kicking skills, but hands are very important. And as you move a little bit closer, you can still kick and you can still use your hands, but now you're very vulnerable to close quarter combat skills and things like elbows and headbutts and knees. Those are devastating. So those are the tools we want to learn how to use. And then, of course, once we move into the closest range where there's body contact, that's where things like joint locks and pressure points and takedowns and throws and chokes and all those things. So as one element of fighting becomes compromised, you have another aspect of training to take over that. So that's what I'm saying. It's not these separate components. It's just a natural progression. Why? Because we have to train them all and train to connect them, because combat is too dynamic. You're not going to be boxing and suddenly someone kicks and you go, oh, we're going to kick now. All right, well, let's kick then, or, oh, we're kicking. Oh, why are you trying to take me down and wrestle with me. That's not wrestle, you know. It doesn't happen that way. So you have to have working knowledge, if not strong knowledge, of the various components of combat, in my opinion, to have a comprehensive style. And that's what I try to do with my training and then with my art. And to my surprise, other people followed it. They had joined my school and they wanted to train with me, and they wanted me to come to their school, and they want to represent me. And that's how this art became an organization, and a worldwide organization.
Nice. And what would you say is the main concept that puts all of this together, that makes it a system?
Right. So in Farang Mu Sul, just like everything with martial arts, if you don't have a code of ethics and what we call a philosophy of what you do,
Right.
There's a saying that I remember a friend of mine told me that that it's just like sailing on the ocean without a compass. If you don't have a compass, you're always going straight. Am I going straight? I guess so, because you're just going straight. You're just out there on the boat and you're just going out, and as far as you know, you're straight. But a compass will tell you, oh, I was straight, now I'm veering, west. Oh, I better correct that if that's what I want to do. So that philosophy for our martial arts is very, very important. And the philosophy of Farang Mu Sul, we have various etiquette principles that we follow, but there's two main core pillars of Farang Mu Sul, and that's perfection of character and effectiveness in our techniques. So in our ability to use our techniques, that they should be effective, and at the same time we should be improving ourselves as a person, because these are higher aspects of martial arts. And if we always focus on those two principles, we never have to come back to them like, oh, we're always fighting, we're always sparring, and we never really worked on our improvement of our character, and then we become very thuggish and very Street Fighter-ish and all that kind of stuff, or vice versa, where we're just so philosophical and just so, all this, but we don't really fight, then we're paper tigers. So it has to be somewhere in the middle, this balance of both of these things. And it's my feeling that if we do that, all of these other aspects of why we train can be addressed. So for example, everybody that starts a martial art has their own reason for doing that. Most reason, in my experience, the number one reason most people came to train with me, and mine as well, was to learn how to defend myself, learn how to fight. And even though I could do boxing, I could do whatever was available to me at that time, it started to become clear to me that martial arts, Oriental martial arts, Asian martial arts, is a very powerful way of learning how to defend yourself. And then at some point you find a great teacher. You might be interested in a particular style, but more important than the style is a good teacher, someone who can find the best qualities in you and learn to bring them out and make you a better person, a better fighter, and all these kinds of things.
Nice. And what does this art? What is it that makes it a Korean art?
Sure. Well, what makes it a Korean martial art is because the foundation of the art is from Korean martial arts. Even though there's other influences, like I said, Western boxing, jab, cross, left hook, duck, bob and weave, all that is part of Farang Mu Sul. That's the modern part of Farang Mu Sul. Okay. But the core, the main framework of Farang Mu Sul comes from Korean martial arts that I studied, whether they be Taekwondo or various versions of Hapkido, or other Korean martial arts such as Kuksulwan or Warangdo or Sunmuwan or Do Hapsul, which I studied in Korea. Those are the foundation of the style. So, excuse me.
That's okay.
Close that off. Those are the foundation of what we do, and from there, again, I don't view the techniques that we are doing as, oh, this is a Korean technique. Oh, this is a Kempo technique. Oh, this is that technique. Kicking is kicking is kicking. A side kick is a side kick is a side kick. A choke is a choke is a choke. An arm bar is an arm bar. A wrist lock is a wrist lock. A shoulder throw is a shoulder throw. I look at it more that way. Okay. Having said that, there absolutely is a difference between the way the Chinese martial arts do side kicks, for example. Japanese martial arts does side kicks as a general rule, traditionally speaking. And the way Korean martial arts do side kicks. There is a Korean way, if you will, but at the end of the day, it's still a side kick. And so in Farang Mu Sul, we use that foundation of Korean martial arts to build upon that concept of and yang, the yin and yang of Korean martial arts. That is a part. And as you're showing right there, kicking is a big part of what we do. And kicking is very renowned in the Korean martial arts,
Right. Amazing. So you started this. Let's see. I don't know if it's okay to say, but this eclectic vision of your art, right? Bringing in from different elements and different masters and different styles. When did you start this? Because now, I mean, I'm trying to get to a point here. Now we're in 2022. Now it's like a normal thing, right? Everybody kind of thinks that way, and we take it for granted, right? Of course, you're going to take elements of jiu-jitsu and you're going to take elements of the Filipino arts or whatever, but I mean, when I started in the martial arts in the 80s, there was no such thing, right? I mean,
Not cool. It was not cool to cross train. If your
yeah,
teacher found out that you were training with another teacher or another style, you could get kicked out. You can get beat up. Most, not all of them, but most. That was the general way things worked in the old days. You know, it was not cool to cross train and do different styles. So in my particular case, exactly, I was very intrigued about learning other methods of training, and I wasn't so bothered by, is this a Japanese way, or is this, Korean way, or is this Chinese way. I just wanted to learn what is this martial art that I'm seeing, that my friend is showing, or that I bought a video over, or I read about in a magazine, whatever. What are some of the things that are about this that I find important and useful and interesting, for that matter. And so a lot of my early training that I did, aside from where I was training at my school, for example, when I was in Kempo, I started doing Japanese martial arts. I started doing Chinese martial arts, and I didn't broadcast that. I just did that because I had friends that were showing me this and sharing with me, and I was very cool with sharing and sparring and testing things out and competing in tournaments. One of the reasons I liked going to tournaments was because you could see these other styles competing in forms. What do their forms look like, and what are their fighting techniques? And when you saw their demos, you can see, oh, these guys do a lot of throwing, a lot of joint locks, and these guys have weapons, and these guys don't have weapons. So I found that all very, very fascinating. And for me personally, as I was going through my journey, I was trying to get exposure to different styles to complement my training. Again, remember, I was thinking I'm going to get black belt and everything and try to put it all together in my head. At some point, that became a formal way of me training, and then of me teaching. As I began to teach, formally was probably in 1976 when I started teaching at City College in San Francisco. We had a City College martial arts group. And in that group were people from different styles. So I brought the Korean martial arts to that group, and we would share and we would interact. And when I went back to my school, I wasn't doing anything but what my teacher wanted me to do and what my teacher wanted me to teach. Right. I followed his curriculum, but I kept enriching my knowledge with these other ways. And then at some point, like for example, when I was teaching Hwarangdo under my old teacher Jubang Lee, Grandmaster Jubang Lee in Los Angeles, I taught what he wanted me to teach. I taught the curriculum that he wanted. I taught the forms that he wanted, because otherwise I get in major trouble.
Right.
But I would teach my students a lot of what I would call extra or variations outside of the regular class. So they would have, again, for example, when you take a person down and you finish your technique, you finalize it, we would lock him up. We call it a lockup. You get him on the floor, you lock him up, and you punch him or you kick him, and then and you disengage. That was a finishing technique, right? So we had certain finishing techniques, and I'll give it like maybe 3 or 4 that my teacher insisted that I teach. And I was like, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But me personally, I know a lot of other finishing techniques that I know and I feel are very good. They're very effective, and they would be great to share that with my students. So I would do that on the DL. They would do this was extra knowledge and just variations and things like that. And then when ultimately I ended up breaking away from Jubang Lee, when I moved back to San Francisco in '88. That is when those extra techniques became formal requirements. I started to rework the system that I was teaching, and I formally made boxing and trapping and groundwork and weaponry and all that kind of stuff a comprehensive level on the basics. Wow. And then from that basic, we build the next level, and it's comprehensive. And the next level, we go full circle. I don't know, we'll build this, and then we'll build some of this, and we'll build this. Oh, now we go to the next level. We have a big hole over here, so we got to fill that hole and catch up, and then we're going to build some more. No, we go full circle, solid foundation, next level, full circle, solid foundation, and build and build and build. And that was my thinking, and that's what led me to making Farang Mu Sul as a very comprehensive system based on solid foundations and interconnectivity of the techniques as well as the philosophy involved.
Wow. So you were a visionary, man. I mean, definitely. Because I got to say this, because like I said, when we don't see the context of what was going on at that time, we tend to judge things from our time, right, from our environment. So of course, right now we say, of course, you did what everybody is doing now, 40 years later, right? So doing that back in those days, it was like, I mean, visionary for sure.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I was influenced by Masoyama and by Bruce Lee, for example. I realized Morihei Ueshiba, right, a founder of Aikido. I realized that they had various training that they had. Martial arts don't start from the thin air and then boom, martial art is born. Everything comes from somewhere. Right. Somebody somewhere started to train and was very good at something, and they've structured and formalized it, and they shared it with others. And if they found that there was some weakness involved, then they filled that weakness. Because in the old days, martial arts were life protecting arts, because we're talking about swords and war and military involvement of the martial arts. So at some point, everybody had to learn something. So I realized as I started studying martial arts that some of these very famous masters all started somewhere. Masoyama started somewhere, and then he founded Kyokushinkai. And Morihei Ueshiba, he did these various versions of judo and jiu-jitsu and founded Aikido. And Bruce Lee, again, he did his Wing Chun, and he had influence in Korean martial arts and wrestling and boxing and all those kinds of things. And he created Jeet And the problem was, I thought to myself, who am I? Who am I to do this? So I tried not to never make it a point that like I'm creating something or I'm founding something. As a matter of fact, I never called myself the founder of anything. I just, as I said, this is my school. This is what I teach. This is what I practice in my school. At some point, we gave it a name. We started calling it Modern Farang Do, where we use Farang Do as our foundation, and modern allowed us to go beyond that mold. And it was my students and my peers and my seniors who were telling me that you are a master, you are a grandmaster, you are a founder of a style. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I am no founder. I am no grandmaster. It took me years to feel comfortable with someone calling me master, where I felt like, okay, I've been around the block enough. I've had my experience in the streets and in tournaments. I was in the military. I was stationed overseas. I think I know what I'm talking about when I talk about combat and self-defense and the philosophy of martial arts. I think I have enough experience I'm speaking with authority now. So I feel okay with being a master. Then boom, I was grandmaster. And I was like, oh no.
I gotcha. Well, still, I mean, you could say that you were on the shoulders of giants, of course, but still you were looking at the innovators, right? Like Bruce Lee or Morihei Ueshiba or Masoyama with his Kyokushinkai. So I think still there's a lot of credit to give to you because of, like I said, the time and the era, being that it was going against of the teachings of the masters, right? And of course, time showed you that you were on the right track, right?
Well, for sure, mi hermano, I got so much criticism and critiques, and who was I? Korean martial arts, you're not Korean. You know, I had so many naysayers all my life, but fortunately for me, I'm not saying I wasn't affected by criticism, because I'm human. Everyone does. But sure. If anything, these critics, all it did was spur me to like, no, It just made me more resilient, more determined to make sure that what I was doing was on the right foot. You know what I mean? That I was doing the right thing, and I can prove it. And as I used to tell my students all the time, like, fortunately, right now I'm still young enough where I can do it. I won't tell you, I will show you. And I'm old enough where I've learned a thing or two, and I won't tell you, I will show you, and I'll be on the map. And this here is my private office and my private gym, and I teach to this day on the mats. As long as I can, as long as my health holds out, I will be on the mats.
Nice, nice. Okay, we have some people saying hello. Let me bring in some of the comments. Okay, let's see. Maestro Bagelis Drosso, salud, Master Frank. Salud, sir, all the way to Greece. Thank you. Let's see. Master Nelson Pinto. Hola. Hello, Grandmaster Soto and Cooksan, named Grandmaster de Alba, my dear teacher. FMS Florida in the house. Farang. Nice. Nice. Let's see. Maestro González Reyes from Chile. Saludos, Maestro Frank. Saludos, Maestro.
Saludos.
Okay. Miguel
From
Mocho.
England. Mocho.
Yeah, I guess. Or Farang from England.
Miguel Mocho is a student of Master Pinto from Portugal, but he moved to England, Oxford, years ago. So he lives in England. He's a really good martial artist.
Nice, nice. Hello, sir. Let's see. Hold on. Guro Catherine Sumter. Hello, Master Frank and Master Michael. What a cool looking space you have with a ton of weapons. Can we have a quick look? Also, can you share your experiences with stick fighting? Cheers from CCDP Worldwide, Squame, Washington. I guess, let's see. Let me put you on a bigger screen so they can see a little bit more of what you got there. There we go.
Well, it's my garage. It's a 2-car garage. I've always been teaching. Actually, the funny thing is I started to teach literally the first day I started training officially in martial arts. The day I started training with Carlos Navarro, I learned, my uniform, I had to my belt, I learned horse stance, and how to punch and do the blocks and everything. And the first thing I did, Frank, is when I got home, I pushed the coffee table away from our living room, and my younger brother, Master James, and my younger sister, Norma, they were my first 2 students, and I would start teaching them everything we just did. So I started to teach very, very early on. I really enjoyed teaching. I really enjoyed sharing. And then all my life, wherever I lived, wherever I was stationed, wherever I was at, I found a way to teach, whether it was renting space or teaching at the rec center or teaching in a church or teaching in the park. I would practice wherever. And I always kind of want to have my own spot. And everywhere I lived, my garage was always my personal. That's where I hung my bags, my mirrors, and I always trained. So now that I have a little bit more space, and yeah, I kind of been around for a while. I have way more swords than I ever had before. I have way more knives. I have way more sticks and all that kind of stuff. So this is my little world here. This is my little kingdom. And of course, we have, to my surprise, schools all around the world. I have schools in England. I have schools in Portugal, in Germany, in Poland, in South Africa, Mexico, all these different places. There are people who train and learn Farang Mu Sul and try to teach it, try to pass it on. And I have the fortune to be connected with them. This modern technology has really allowed me to stay in touch with everybody and share and even teach and practice. And then in my part of my vision is to visit with them, to go and travel and visit them in person, go to Puerto Rico, go to Germany, and vice versa, have them come and visit me and train here with me. So this is my garage, a 2-car garage. I expanded it out. I laid down my mats, put up my mirrors, and it's just, it's not, I got a little wooden dummy there, and I've got all my sticks and knives and swords, and
nice.
It's not very big, but it's big enough.
Oh, it's cool. It looks really cool.
As far as stick training, to answer that other question,
yeah,
I know that I get a lot of questions about what I'm doing. So what is interesting, I'll tell you this, and maybe you've experienced this, Frank, is when people see you demonstrating your style, whether it's in a demo or you're training, or they come by and observe a class, things like that, they kind of interpret it to their given knowledge, to whatever they understand. They will see what they think they see. And so because our system is very comprehensive, if one day we're doing a lot of trapping, for example, someone may come into my school or see me and go, "Oh, you guys do Wing Chun, huh?" Or if I'm doing a lot of kicking, they go, "Oh, you guys are Taekwondo. Yeah, I see that." Or we're doing a lot of throws and joint locks. "Oh, is this Hapkido? Yeah, that's Hapkido, right?"
Right.
Or groundwork. "Oh, you guys are Jiu-Jitsu school. I see that." Like whatever they understand. And I say, it's not Jiu-Jitsu, but I know what you're talking about. Yes, we do groundwork. It's not Wing Chun, but we do have the trapping skills that are parallel with what they do in Wing Chun. So there is that component as well, and so on. So I tried to give them a little bit more deeper explanation to what we do. But it's all based off Korean martial arts. That's our foundation. And that goes for our stick fighting, for example. When I was going to the various Korean martial arts, I was very interested with weapons. From a little kid, I always had my knife, my little pocket knife, and I was always into knives ever since I was a little kid. And so knife training and knife fighting has been part of my, almost like my DNA since I can remember. And maybe that's part of the reason why they call me the knife man. I don't know. Probably because I started teaching knife fighting quite a bit, both in the military and to the civilian sector. And I started to make videos, and the first one I made was knife fighting. So maybe that's it. And I wrote a lot of articles, but I digress. So in the martial arts that I was practicing, I was very enamored with Korean martial arts. But at that time, there wasn't a lot of weaponry displayed in Korean martial arts. Why? Because the styles that we had available to us, like Taekwondo and Tangsudo and things like that, and Hapkido, they really didn't have weaponry. And a lot of times, the weapons that they would teach at that particular school would have been borrowed from their styles. They'd be doing a Japanese bow staff, for example, form, or they would be doing a Chinese broadsword type of a form or training, and so on and so forth. So that's what I did. I trained in Chinese martial arts and Chinese weaponry. I studied Japanese kobudo, which was Okinawan kobudo, which is Japanese style weapons and things like that. And I tried to research more about Korean weaponry. And the first system that I learned that had Korean weaponry was Kuksulwan. So in Kuksulwan, there's traditional weaponry like that really resonated. The fan and the cane and the sword and the staff and all these things. And I'm like, yeah, now we're talking. Where's the Korean weapons? And it was when I went to Korea and I lived in Korea when I was not only exposed to Korean weaponry, but I was exposed to an extensive amount of Korean weaponry. And of course, as you can imagine, all countries had their own weapons and their own ability to defend themselves, particularly when they talk about warfare. So right. It's no surprise that Korean martial arts, and in Korea, there were schools that taught weapons, and not necessarily just Taekwondo and Hapkido, because actually they kind of did not. Because when I did learn, particularly this one system called Dohapsol, when I walked into a Dohapsol dojang, I was a little bit taken aback with literally wall-to-wall weapons. Everywhere there was weapons, and weapons that I had never seen before. I was very intrigued. And one of the philosophies of this particular art was that everything we do with empty hand has a weapon application, and vice versa. Everything we do with weapons has an empty hand application. That resonated with me. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So nice. That whole concept and that ability to integrate the weaponry and the empty hands, everything as a weapon, is part of Farang Mu Sul. But I started to research more about Korean weapons, and then I started to read some of the one of the few texts that exist today of Korean, ancient traditional Korean weaponry. Weaponry is the Muye Tobo Tonji, and this is a book about the illustrated manual of Korean martial arts, and all those weapons are in there. I found that really, really fascinating. Again, I started studying more and more and more, and along the way, I started to realize that, for example, in Korea, one of the things that we were working on, let's see if I can show it here, is this concept right here of this 45 and 90 degree symbol, right? This little asterisk was part of everything we did with our training. And you see I put it on the bags to teach the angles of sticks and knife and entry. So these angles of 45 and 90 degree combined with the circular patterns of the Om and Yang are core concepts of not only Korean martial arts in general, empty hands, but also very specific to the weaponry. And so those angles of 45 and 90 degree and the circular Om-Yang patterns are very conceptual in nature, but they are present in everything we do. And so, for example, when I was in Korea, I came to realize that we had the we know as a staff in Korea that was called jangbong. Jangbong simply means long stick. Bong is stick. There's a whole category of stick types. So the long staff was called jangbong, and the techniques are called jangbong sul. So it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then a lot of martial arts, like Hapkido, will know the short stick. It's called the danbong. So danbong means short stick, and danbong sul means short stick technique. Like, okay, that makes sense. And then guess what? They have a middle-sized stick. it's called jungbong. Jungbong means middle-sized stick. So there's this middle-sized stick that we would train in, and it would follow these angles of 45 and 90 degree in the circular patterns and so on and so forth. So as we practice the various weapons, whether they were bladed, the long bladed weapon was a sword. Guess what the sword is called? Janggum. All the sword types are called gum-sul. So gum, like your chewing gum, is swords. So the long sword is called a janggum. A short sword is called dangum. And the mid-sized sword or a long knife is called junggum. So there's that very simple structured method of categorizing weaponry allows you to, again, really not only expand the knowledge, but more importantly, connect them. Because bladed weapons have the cutting and stabbing kind of properties, whereas impact weapons such as stick and other cane and things like that, they're all about striking and blocking, things of that nature. So it's a different application. Why? Because of the properties of the weapon. But those concepts of 45 and 90 degree and circular patterns are consistent with all that we do, depending on the reach of the weapon and the type of weapon that it is. And as I start to relate that to other weaponries, for example, with Filipino martial arts, again, people when they see me doing stick training and knife training, they go, "Oh, that's a Eskrima, right? That's Kali." And I go, actually, yes and no. I'm not going to say it's not stick fighting and like Kali, because there's a lot of things that we share. And furthermore, I'm not going to say, no, I never trained in these arts. Oh, yeah, you better believe it. I trained in these styles. I trained with some really fantastic masters of these styles. Why? Because in my opinion, as I was working on these various weaponry, I was thinking to myself, is this the best way I can train this? A stab is a stab is a stab. A slash is a slash is a slash. Is this the best way I can train it? So right. My answer to me was, I don't think so. Let's research this. So who does really good stick fighting and knife fighting? Filipino and Indonesian, these kind of martial arts. Mexican knife fighting, which is also something I learned in Mexico, is very, very dangerous, very powerful, very deadly. So I started to train in these styles, and I just basically integrated them into the format of 45 and 90 degree lines and circular patterns in a very structured way to learn the various tools. And that's how we develop that particular component of that weaponry. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, of course it does. Yes. Thank you for sharing. Let me bring some of the comments, people saying hello. Let's see. Maestro Rafael Herrera, un gran saludo desde España, Maestro Soto y compañía. Gracias. Maestro Liga Jing, saludos para usted, Master Frank. Un abrazo para uno de mis Grandmasters en el Farang en Puerto Rico. Un fuerte abrazo y mis respetos. Excelente. Grandmaster Nathaniel Ortega. Sorry, I was disappearing. I'm back. I can't miss this one for nothing in the world. I have so much admiration for Grandmaster Alba. He's one of the best in the world. Very, very good and awesome martial artist.
The feeling is mutual, brother. The feeling is mutual.
Yes, thank you, sir. It's nice to see you back here, sir. Okay. Mike Blackwell, good afternoon. Con mucho respeto, señores. Respect, sir. Thank you.
Florida.
Yes, Master Liga Jinx dice un gran cariño y respeto por él siempre.
Farang, Jonathan.
Antonio dice, Master Soto and Cooksanim, thank you for an amazing overview and interview. I never get enough of Grandmaster Alba and all his teachings. Nice.
Farang.
Liga Jing dice, atentamente, Master Liga Jing, Wing Sung Kung Fu, Puerto Rico family. Thank you, sir. Sensei Julie Owens. Hello, masters. Hello, Julie. Let's see. Íñiguez José, saludos de Argentina, master. Saludos.
Farang, ¿cómo está?
Well, this is, it sounds really simple, but it's so cool in how you make the connections, how you interrelate or interconnect everything, right? I mean, like I said, now these days, this sounds like, oh, of course, it's logical. But now we have all this information and we have all of these points of views and you have access to, I mean, just YouTube and this and all of that. You can research. It's so easy, right? I mean, much easier now than it was. Because I remember back in the 80s or the 90s, you will have to go and look for example, here in Mexico, you will go to one store, Sanborns, that had Black Belt magazine, and you will get the magazine 3, 4, 5 months, you know, um,
Past.
fast, yes. And sometimes even a year, if you get the Budoka from Spain, for example, or something like that, and you were like, oh, yes, get the magazine and start looking for. I remember looking for technique sequences in the magazine and pictures and trying to figure them out and stuff like that. So it was a different time, right? Um, so, what is it that you were looking for? The two pillars you mentioned. Was that the main thing that you were looking for? That self perfection and the effectiveness. Is that what
Well,
drives
to be
you?
honest, like I said, for me initially, I was trying to be all I can be. You know, I was just trying to be the best martial artist that I could be. I wanted to be the best fighter. I wanted to be the best person. I wanted to be a good person in my regular life. I want to be a good son, a good father, a good brother, a good cousin, a good husband, all boyfriend, good husband, like this. I was trying to be a better person, and those things start to crystallize to me that those are very important aspects of training that martial arts does address.
Right.
And when it comes to the spiritual side, the personal side, of course, what we're talking about are more intangible things, the internal arts, the philosophical arts of understanding other teachings, the teachings of Christ, the teachings of Buddha, these things that make you a better person, right? But then when it comes to martial arts, again, I realize the nuts and bolts, I need to work on more, for example, kicking. I need to really improve upon my trapping. So again, rather than reinvent the wheel, who does good trapping? JKD guys do really good trapping, and Wing Chun guys do really good trapping. How can I integrate them? What are their training methods? Like I said, when it comes to, for example, an arm bar or a choke or whatever, choke is a choke is a choke is a choke. I can choke. I can put you on the ground and choke you. You can put me on the ground and choke me. That's all fine. I can trap and hit you, and you can trap and hit me right back. What's the difference? How can I make this a better version of my training? And that is exactly the answer, is the training. What training methods can I use to make me better? So, for example, if I have no training and I try to run a 100-yard dash, I can, do X amount of, success. But compare that to an Olympic style runner, he'll like dust me, right? Because he has way better training. There's other things that he's done to improve that aspect of his skill. So his nutrition, his sprints, his, all his road work, all these things that he's done to improve that particular skill takes his skill to a high level. And so I thought about that in terms of the martial arts. How can I improve upon my kicking? Focus on kicking and styles that do emphasize kicking. That'd be a good idea to do. How can I improve my grappling? Like, why spin them around? Just go to jiu-jitsu and BJJ. Those guys are really good. And what can I learn from that and integrate that into what I train with, and so on. So that kind of was my focus initially. And what ended up happening, like I said, is this comprehensive style, which on one hand is very kind of overwhelming for people. Like, oh my God, there's too much training, there's too much requirements, and it's overwhelming the amount of techniques. There's 4,000 techniques, and I got to do grappling. I don't like grappling, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's all fine. You don't have to like it. Just train in it. And if there's something that you do like, then specialize in it. But more importantly, you have working knowledge in all of these components, right? So that was my one emphasis, is let's at least just work on this and have a comprehensive system. And if you're smart and you're paying attention, you'll realize that it's not all of these, it's not all of this overwhelming amount of information. It's actually all very, very simple. Like Bruce Lee would say, it's like a finger pointing away to the moon. If you focus on the finger, you're missing the point. You're missing all this heavenly glory. There's all this going on that if you get that concept, you'll understand that constellation. You will see the matrix. You'll see how things connect. And I say everything is part of the one. Everything is part of the one. I'm always trying to connect whatever I'm teaching with my students. Techniques, I try to connect it to their forms. Their forms, I will explain that to a philosophy. I'll explain how, for example, in and Yang, the hard and the soft, how they're interdependent and how they rely on one another for completeness. Without the existence of Yang, soft has no meaning unless you compare it to hard. And high is relevant to low, and fast is relevant to slow. So all these philosophies can be seen in our Korean martial arts. And so, for example, if we understand hard and soft in Korean martial arts, see the symbol over here? This is called the samguk, right there.
Right.
Samguk is a little bit different symbol that is in Korean martial arts. In terms of Asian martial arts, they have what is known as the yin yang symbol, right? That's Chinese. It talks about the dualities of life, the universe, right? From the I Ching and all this kind of stuff, right? The yin yang. And you have a black circle and a red circle, and they're combined into one circle. And the black component has a white dot, and the white component has a black dot, which represents the element of the opposite. By the existence of the opposite, each side attains wholeness and their interdependency to become complete. If we're talking about a four-sided object, we're talking about a square. If we're talking about a three-sided object, we're talking about a triangle. If we're talking about a one, we're talking about a circle. It has no beginning and it has no end. And in order for that circle to be complete, for there to be movement and energy, it must have dual forces.
Right.
Like you said, if you think about pedaling on a bicycle, one foot pushes and the other foot relaxes and just receives that energy. And then at some point, that pushing energy runs out, and you have to now turn this one into push, and this one becomes receive. And in that way, that duality of negative and positive, pushing and pulling, creates oneness, and there is that energy. So those philosophical concepts apply to everything we do in martial arts. And it's interesting to see that visually with our joint locks, with our throws, with our weaponry, with our forms. It's just, that makes it much more fun to me and rewarding. And in that way, I tell my students, it's all very easy. You're looking at this the wrong way. If you focus on learning the concepts, you'll realize that so many techniques come from there. And if you can take a concept, you realize, there's certain techniques that come right from that concept. So it's both sides. You see what I'm saying? And that makes all of these techniques actually very simple to me. And for example, we have one set that is defense from body grabs. There's 50 techniques in You're like, oh my God, how am I going to learn 50 techniques? Like, really? How many ways can you think of someone grabbing your body, choking you, giving you a bear hug, putting you in a headlock, tackling your legs from the front, from the back? There's several ways, right? Well, let's just say there's 10, 5 in the front, 5 in the back, or 5, right? And if you assign, 5 per those 10, there's 50 right there. But really, there's only 5 ways to deal with someone choking you. There's only 5 ways to deal with someone putting you in a headlock. You're looking at this the wrong way. Those 5 techniques, as a matter of fact, all of the techniques we practice are simply an example of what you can do. It's a sample of a solution to these problems we're giving ourselves. These are formulas. These are not the end all, be all, and the answer, and it's written in stone, and it's like the Bible, and you can't deviate. No. These are examples. It is that finger pointing you in the right direction. And if you can see it in that way, you realize, this is so much more. When I do this kind of joint lock, this outside wrist lock, that also gives me levers. It also gives me shoulder cranks. And if I go this way, it gives me an inside wrist lock, and I straighten out to an arm bar or a lever. And you see that all this family of techniques are joined by understanding the energy involved and the philosophy of the techniques involved. And where do those techniques fall into? Well, a certain category. They work really well here at this closer range. They do not work in the kicking range. You're not going to put someone in a joint lock in kicking range. But as soon as you get your hands on them, then joint locks are very powerful, and so on.
Nice. Okay, let's see. Okay, Julie says, I hope you will both grace us at the gathering this year. And excellent information. Nice, thank you, Julie. Maestro Juan Martín Álvarez, saludos, maestro desde Argentina. Saludos, master. Gracias. Yeah, well, we're running out of time, but I want to ask one more question before we go to the end of the show. How is it that you kept yourself on track? Because back in those days, the belief was that if you went on your own and started exploring, you had this the risk of getting lost, so to speak, right? That was the thing. That's why you need to follow your instructor or a master in the arts or whatever, right? And follow a path, a do. So how is it that you kept yourself on track until this day? What was your secret, so to speak?
Well, to be perfectly honest, one of my biggest struggles, and some of the times I felt the most lonely, is when I didn't have a teacher. When I didn't have a school to go train in, when I didn't have a teacher that could teach me and guide me, when I didn't have a system that was showing me a particular path and a structured method of achieving these various goals that I may have had. That was a very difficult time for me. And that happened a lot, whether I was living by myself or in the military or stationed somewhere or whatever, depending on that particular phase of my life. I had different teachers, and there were big times when I didn't have a teacher. Even now, I'm the grand master of my system. That doesn't mean I don't want to learn. On the contrary, I'm more than a master of things. I am a master student. I'm always looking to learn more, to improve upon myself. And what does that mean? I look for teachers, whether they're formal teachers or like you and I. We share. We got together. We started working on some stuff. We share. You might pick up, with any luck, you might learn something from me. And with any luck, I might learn something from you. And I'm always looking for that. I'm looking for teachers and guides. And so even though my last master was Grandmaster Jubangli, I left him a long time ago, I still look for other masters. My teacher right now, Grandmaster Sel from Korea, he's my mentor. I learn from him, but I learn from everybody. Anybody that I meet, they might have something that will help me. And that includes students. From the very beginning white belt, I might learn something from him. Why? Especially white belts. You know why? Because white belts are like a clean sheet, and you have to start writing on there. And there's some students who right away understand what you're writing, what you're trying to explain. And there's many students, you know what I'm talking about, they don't get it. Like, how does that work? I don't understand. My hands don't want to do that. And, so you have to find ways to teach them what you think you know, but make them understand. And in the process, a lot of times, you will learn more about what you thought you knew. And that's that process of continuing learning, improving upon your craft, and not letting yourself get rusty and old and resting on your laurels, because a lot of these are perishable skills. If you don't stay working on them, you'll lose your flexibility, you'll lose your stamina, you'll lose things, you'll forget things. So we have to stay busy. I use the example of a beautiful, amazing, sharp sword. When people get their black belt Farang Mu Sul, I equate it to making a beautiful, amazing, resilient, strong, sharp. So we get these raw materials to make the metal and the bit and everything, and stick it in the fire, and we get it red hot. We start pounding on it and making a shape, and then we put it right back in the fire. And we pound on it and pound on it. And that whole process, before you know, we come out with this beautiful sword that's resilient, it's sharp, it's shiny. We have beautiful ornamentation for the handle and the guard and the sheath, and fantastic. We worked so hard to make this amazing weapon. That's our martial arts training. That's our weapon. We worked so hard to achieve this. Why should I take that beautiful weapon and just stick it in the closet and let it get old and dusty? Because if I don't touch it for 10 years, and I need that, I pull it out, I may come out with just the handle, or I try to hit something with it and it'll break, because it has not been cared for and taken care of and used and tested and polished and repaired and put back in use. So I feel that's how we need to address our martial arts training, is to stay active and keep busy and never lose your passion, because remember what got you started, and see that same happiness and that joy, excitement and mystery in the students that you work with and the friends that you work with, that this is still something very mysterious for them, something very difficult for them. And it's part of my joy, is not so much making myself a better martial artist, but helping others to attain the benefits that I've received. That's been my thing for a long time now.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing, sir. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, sir, how can they reach you through social media?
Sure. We have our website, which is farangmusul.com. There's our link there with all our information. It's kind of an older website, but basic information is there. My email address is on there, mdalba@comcast.net. It's very easy to reach. There's on YouTube numerous videos that explain different components of Farang Mu Sul. There's various masters of Farang Mu Sul that have exposed about that. For example, Master Pinto. Master Pinto is very prolific on Facebook and YouTube, and showing all these various videos and demonstrations and different components of the art. And then just, write to me, look us up, one of us up, Master Pinto, Master Schlater, Master Vega, Daniel from Dervishville from Germany. Just look up your local guy, and if you can't, then contact us. We'll try to put you in touch. Unfortunately, we're not in everywhere, but we're trying. And with any luck, you can start training it. And it's things like this, like online training, things like DVDs and digital downloads. That makes learning the art on a long distance way a lot more useful. And that's actually something I've been working on for years. Is trying to make our training more available to other people who are not, in the same town as an instructor or a school. You know what I mean? But like I say, where there's a will, there's a way.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, sir. This was amazing. The hour went by fast, really fast. Let's see. We have somebody else saying hello. Nelson says, awesome interview. Even after decades learning from you, Cooks and the Alba, each time I hear you talking about FMS. Always learn something new or reach a new understanding. Thank you for sharing this experience, and thank you, hermano Soto, to promote our family, Farang. It's an honor, sir. It's an honor. Thank you.
Master Pinto, really good guy.
Yeah, tremendous. Julie Owens says, thank you. Let's see. Kempo Joe, Grandmaster Joe Ribello, so glad to see this episode. Followed the Alba for decades through the martial arts magazines. Thank you, sir. Nice to have you here. Well, I got to say, thank you so much, sir. This was great. Like I said, our time goes by fast when you're having a good time. So this was really, really interesting. I always learn a lot from my guests. I'm always very, very grateful for your time and your knowledge and your wisdom and everything you shared today. It's an honor. And if you want to say just a few last words to our viewers or anything you want to add, sir.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me thank you for having this medium, and number one, just being my friend. Ever since I met you, you meet people through your martial arts training that you feel a kindred spirit. And when I first met you and I not because we're both Mexican, well, there's that too, but you and I connected right away as martial artists, what I call true martial artists, and we had no problem sharing and questioning each other, and that's a beautiful thing. And that's kind of one of the nice things about the gathering, is it brings these different people together and allows us to share in a spirit of sharing, right? So first of all, I want to thank you. I learn from you all the time. You are just such not only an amazing martial artist, but you're a great person. I love to associate with good people, and you're one of them, my hermano. I appreciate that. And I can't wait to see you again. As far as everyone else out there, well, just follow your heart and set goals for yourself, because this is something that should be a passion. One of the things that really bothers me is when I talk to people about, and they go, "Oh, you do martial arts?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do this." And, "Oh, yeah, I used to be a black belt." Like, again, I talked about that sword. Like, you used to be a black belt. How does you stop being a black belt after all that work? You just stopped. I did karate when I was a kid. That's all. And again, that just shows you how different people have their own journeys and their own passion. Not everyone is crazy like me. Not everyone is, So follow your passion. Look for a good teacher. Métele ganas, don't give up. Just keep training. Where there's a will, there's a way. And there's always something new to learn, both from technique-wise as well as about yourself. And enjoy the ride. Smell the proverbial roses along the way, because life is too short. Tomorrow's not a guarantee. So take advantage of every day. Martial arts is a beautiful path for that,
Amen. Thank you, sir. Antonio says, Farang, sir.
Antonio.
Michael Lee Martin, thank you for teaching us, senseis. Thank you, sir. It's an honor. Well, thank you so much, my friend. This was really, really good. Like I said, it's an honor, and you always have my respect and admiration, my friend. You are an amazing martial artist and also a great, great person. Thank you so much. I also feel like I've known you for many, many years, much more than when I met you, and it's nice to see a person who is really added at teaching the arts and serving the community and helping the students. That's really cool. That's what I believe this is all about. So thank you.
I agree, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you. The feeling is mutual, hermano.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. And thank you, everybody, for watching this show. Tomorrow, Café y Artes Marciales con Master René Gatica. Saturday, Open Mat Talks con Sensei Rodrigo Salas. And next week, we have much, much more. So, thank you again, sir.
Toda mi familia, Latinoamérica, habla hispano, mucho gusto, saludos, siguen trabajándole duro.
Muchas gracias. Well, sir, we might invite you next time into Café y Artes Marciales and do this in español. ¿Te parece?
Me parece muy bien.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Well, thank you so much again. Thank you, everybody. Take care and have a great day. Bye-bye.